Ija from Lenox, Illinois. Emily from Chicago, Lakeview area. Winter Park, Florida. Thanks for being here, Elizabeth. We've got Sherwood, Wisconsin. San Antonio, Texas. Thanks, NJ. Bobby coming in from Olympia, Washington. Farmington Hills, Michigan. Terrific. Menlo Park, California. Des Moines, Iowa. Wow. UK, Kate and Tom. Thanks for being here. Wonderful. Let's keep that going. We've got Maine. We've got Kensington, Maryland. We've got San Antonio, Texas. Let's keep that going. And I will move us ahead and get started as more folks join us and continue to check in. So I am Anna Garcia Doyle, and I'm the Executive Director of the One Earth Film Festival. I want to welcome you to our virtual screening and discussion, which we hope will present rich opportunities for learning and provide a brave and safe space for important conversations that matter deeply right now in our country and across the globe. One Earth's 10th season theme is inspiring change. Talk about inspiring. While watching Kiss the Ground, I literally gasped when they said that one handful of soil has more microorganisms than the number of people who have ever lived on Earth. I couldn't believe it. So watch for keys to solving our climate crisis, keys literally sitting beneath our feet. I don't want to go any farther without thanking our amazing sponsors and partners without whom we could not do this work. So thank you to Green America, to Mother Jones, to the Nature Conservancy, to the Conservation Foundation, to Fox Watershed Partners, and to the Elmhurst Cool Cities Coalition. Two other quick notes. At the end of this event, please share your experiences on the survey linked to at the top of your video window so that One Earth can keep improving what we do. And if your circumstances allow, please donate to support One Earth's nonprofit, year-round screening events, youth programs, and more at oneearthfilmfest.org. We are thrilled you're with us as One Earth Film Fest celebrates 10 years of inspiring change and utilizes the power of film to spark change on topics of environment and those intersected with environment, like social justice. The fest has had to adapt to a virtual format, but we strive to stay true to our model. While we're not physically together, we are here together, live, virtually, still able to create community, become aware of issues, engage in dialogue, and be inspired to act. African-American activist Angela Davis said, "You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world." The stories in our fest films reflect that possibility. Our collective actions will achieve that possibility. Our event will take place in 4 parts. We'll introduce you to some folks who will help us have a great discussion after the film. We'll then watch it together. Then afterwards, we'll unpack the film's themes in a facilitated Q&A with our wonderful panelists. Please participate by using the chat to share thoughts, ideas, or questions. We'll end by sharing concrete actions you can take to be part of the solution. These actions come from our panelists and other action partners. As we live current movements and reframe narratives around justice, environment, and bringing innovative, equitable solutions to our climate crisis, we're hopeful for the future. I am grateful to the knowledgeable filmmakers, film subjects, facilitators, and panelists joining this and other fest events. They'll guide discussions to help spark and sustain actions for the protection of our One Earth and for the just treatment of its resources and its people. We've found that shared agreements help keep our conversations safe and respectful. Please observe these agreements when participating. Put aside your preconceptions, acknowledge your privilege, internalize what you've learned, approach the conversation with respect. Engage your active listening, use I statements and get comfortable with your own story. Acknowledge Native peoples who came before us in protecting our land. One last thing before we meet our facilitator and program participants. If you're active on social media, tell people this is happening. Amplify these voices and be part of the community we're building here together. The hashtag for the festival is hashtag OEFF2021. Thanks again to all of you for being here. And now I'd like to turn it over to our facilitator to introduce themselves, the panelists, and our film.
Thank you, Anna. My name is Tom Philpott. I'm very excited to be here. I am the Food and Agriculture Correspondent for Mother Jones Magazine and the author of Perilous Bounty, The Looming Collapse of American Farming, which came out in 2020. Just a brief word about the OEFF model. We often watch movies and just walk out of the theater, sort of bolt, and don't really think about or reflect what we saw, how we felt about it, what the implications are for our lives. But these are very important films in this festival, And so today we have a rich and thought-provoking dialogue sparked by this movie, Kiss the Ground, and joined by some very knowledgeable and committed panelists. And we look forward to having you participate, enriching the dialogue with reflections and questions in the chat that we hope you use, and exploring ways to take related action. And so I'd like to briefly introduce the panelists that we'll be hearing from after the film. And we'll learn more about them after the film. But for now, we have Don Smith from Kiss the Ground, Darion Crawford representing the Urban Growers Collective in Chicago, and Todd Larsen from Green America. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the film Kiss the Ground. Narrated and featuring Woody Harrelson, Kiss the Ground is an inspiring and groundbreaking film, literally groundbreaking film, that explores the first viable solution to our climate crisis. Kiss the Ground reveals that by regenerating the world's soils, we can completely and rapidly stabilize the Earth's climate, restore lost ecosystems, and also create abundant food supplies. Using compelling graphics and visuals, along with striking NASA and NOAA footage, the film artfully illustrates how, by drawing down the atmospheric carbon, soil is the missing piece of the climate puzzle. The movie is positioned to catalyze a movement to accomplish the impossible, to solve humanity's greatest challenge, to balance the climate, and to secure our species' future. And with no further ado, welcome back. With no further ado, we wanted to go out to the audience and ask, what are some of the scenes, people, or lines that you remember or that sparked a thought? And we have some great comments coming in. Cassandra mentions after that rousing finish that she's feeling helpful. She's feeling hopeful again. And there were some tears from Luan because feeling a little bit less despair. We have Toma mentioning the sort of shocking stat that we use 3 pounds of pesticides per person per year. Just the stunning sort of status quo of things remain like they are. Cindy and Maya mentioned that there will be 1 billion refugees globally due to soil desertification. Dalia mentioned something that doesn't come up in the movie, I don't think, enough, and that is that she experiences environmental racism every day. And Stephanie makes some important... Getting an echo. Stephanie makes some important interventions about how Africa's system, Africa's entire sort of ecology was disrupted and destroyed by colonialism. And we need to disrupt some of the typical narratives about African nations. Like, we're not, people in the West aren't saviors for Africa, but in fact, we are the cause of much of the ecological decline there, and need to take responsibility and also listen to people on the ground there. And Mick talks about just the, stunning burden of the legacy load of carbon dioxide that humanity, mostly from the Industrial Revolution and on in the West, has emitted, and that we're going to be dealing with for the lifetimes of everyone here. Let's see what else. Lisa intervenes, go vegan. Not quite what the film was getting at, but I think that getting off conventional meat is a great idea. And I think Stephanie makes another important point that I want to bring up, and that is that let me see where I am here. That basically in indigenous places, there are, over millennia, people have developed ways of making food forests out of ecosystems in ways that benefit ecosystems. And that's something that we should learn from. as well. Yes. So, basically the basic point here is that the chat is just bursting with great conversations and great comments. And we will be getting back to that pretty soon. But right now, we want to get to our panel, our amazing panel. Once again, I am Tom Philpott. I am the food and agriculture correspondent for Mother Jones Magazine and author of the 2020 book that is very relevant to this topic, which is called Perilous Bounty. It came out last year. And let us know. And I should say that I spent some years farming in North Carolina in the early 2000s, a small organic farm. So these are things that I've been thinking about a lot. So it's really great to see them come together in one film. From there, we are very excited to have Don Smith, who is the program advisor and teacher at Kiss the Ground. And Don loves awakening people to the power and possibilities of regeneration. He's passionate about getting people to see that we are part of nature. It isn't that there's nature over here and us over here, but we are part of nature. And he loves to get the word out about how soil health, our health, and the health of all life forms on the planet are intimately connected. Then we are very excited to have Darion Crawford, who is an urban farmer and instructor at an amazing group in Chicago called the Urban Growers Collective. Darion is an urban farmer, and if I said Darion earlier, I apologize. It's Darion Crawford is an urban farmer and lead for adult training and lead for the adult training program at the Urban Growers Collective. And he's passionate about growing healthy soil through simple but effective composting and vermicomposting. And we would love to hear more about that in a few minutes. And then finally, we have Todd Larsen, who's the executive co-director for consumer and corporate engagement at Green America. His work involves educating individuals to make changes in their lives and to use their voices collectively to ensure corporate action on social and environmental issues. And so we're going to have a little panel discussion. And I think I would like to get us. So this is a provocative movie that brings together a lot of information under in one sort of very convenient place. And I'm wondering if we could start by just sort of talking through your impression of the movie and what your takeaway of the movie was. And I wonder if we can get started with Darion. If you could just give us your impressions and what your takeaway was.
Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. I really was how we all have the ability to play and be effective in changing. And in my experience with composting, the entire time composting, I wasn't aware of how much it would affect our ecosystem. So being composting, being able to grow healthy food and be able to kind of back to that is that's what really, it was really important to me, especially work that I've been doing and the work that I've been doing for quite some time about, just and something that I'm really passionate, especially the train and on the information that I've gathered myself. And I've been kind of working in a lot of urban areas, Chicago.
Darion, your audio is coming through a little choppy for me. Why don't I want to come back to you because I really want to get what you're saying, but I want to make sure everyone can hear it. And so I just left a note that your audio is sounding kind of choppy. Maybe our tech people can get onto that. And why don't we move over and get Todd's impressions of the film and your big takeaway from it.
Sure, absolutely. So watching this film, as I saw a lot of people said in the comments, what we see is how destructive our current agriculture system is, what it's doing to the planet, what it's doing to the soil, how it's bad for us as consumers, and how it's even bad for farmers. Yet our dominant economic model, this is what it drives. And so this is why this continues. But if we actually change to regenerative agriculture, how powerful it actually could be. And I know in our work at Green America, we actually work with a number of the farmers who are in this film, and we've actually seen firsthand how powerful regenerative agriculture can be, what it can do to sequester carbon, what it can do to rebuild soil, what it can do to make farms an actual healthy functioning ecosystem, and make sure that farmers are actually able to farm successfully and be financially successful in farming while protecting the earth as well. We've also worked directly with consumers, individuals doing gardening either in their homes or in their communities, and we've seen the transformative effects it has when people directly take part in regenerative agriculture. Wow. So I think this movie brought out a lot of important information that way. I did see in the chat that a number of people mentioned that, this is what indigenous people have been doing for centuries. And I think that's a really good thing to add on to this movie, that yes, this is actually what a lot of people around the world had been doing traditionally for centuries. And capitalist culture imposed this dysfunctional model on the world. And we need to go back to what was actually the practices of people around the world that were working.
Fantastic. How about you, Don? What was your big takeaway in 1 minute?
So I've been pretty intimately involved with this, obviously, for a number of years. So my big takeaway is just that regeneration is the biggest no-brainer of our time. And I don't know what it's going to take to awaken people, but this is a start. And, everybody that got a chance to watch this, it's kind of profound. And I think the economic models even speak to it being a viable option. So I think just everyone waking up to this concept of regeneration, which is so different than degeneration. A lot of us on the planet have been living in this degenerative model, and we just accept that as the norm. Everything's degenerative. And the whole concept of sustainability is don't make it any worse. But regeneration is really flipping it upside down and saying, no, we can actually grow food and make the planet healthier at the same time. We can do that in a lot of areas. So that's the takeaway for me.
Fantastic. Back to you, Darion, after being so rudely interrupted by our tech troubles.
Hey, am I coming through fine now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So again, I've been composting for a while, and so that was my big takeaway from it, and the regeneration of our soils and using our waste to create healthy soils and nutrient-rich food, and understanding how important that is to and getting it to people who doesn't have access to it, and training people who don't quite understand what their impacts. And those were my bigger takeaways, and those are things that I think are really important in just us understanding our role on Earth and how we can better serve our planet.
Fantastic. Why don't we keep the same order? And one thing I would love to do, and I'm really excited to hear Darion talk about this, is I would love to hear a little bit about your work, each one of the panelists, starting with Darion, your work with agriculture and how it relates to this topic of regeneration, like how your personal work relates to this broader topic in the movie. So Darion, I got to say, I've been following the organization Growing Power in Chicago and coming out of Urban Growers Coalition. I visited Erica Allen, the founder, at the farm down there at Grant Park, I believe it's called, probably 15 years ago. So I would just love to hear more about what you guys are up to in Chicago, and if you could talk a little bit about how urban agriculture, which is something we didn't hear a lot about in the movie, could play into this sort of regeneration aspect.
So again, we've been working, and Growing Power kind of goes way back. And UGC is a bit newer of an organization where we more intentionally focus on regenerative practices. And so associated with that will be like the green era and our use of the biodigester and how we're going to use that to turn waste into clean, nutrient-rich soils. Which has always been a passion of mine, but being able to do it on a more impactful scale. So, and that is kind of our goal, is to, so we run different training programs through youth, through toddlers, to adult programs. And what we're doing is we're bringing these guys in urban areas into their own communities and being able to see that, you know, we have this contamination issue where in urban areas we're less likely to be able to grow healthier foods, and most of it is typically due to the lack of nutrient-rich soil. But also understanding how that plays a part in our like just our daily life. Like we eat in abundance, but not in nutrients, and so we tend to like overconsume when our bodies don't require the overconsumption of food. We need the nutrient-rich foods that our soils are giving us. And so we want to, like, you know, my personal goal is that we can train folks on composting is simple. Taking care of your own backyard is simple. Taking care of your neighborhood and your communities can be simple. And you can do it through first having that nutrient-rich soil and using the waste that, you know, we deem is unvaluable to kind of to do that. And also, you know, we have to play our role in, and it's really simple, playing our role in understanding that it's not necessarily, you know, my neighbor who is negatively impacting the world on a larger scale, but how those smaller scale things will be impactful. Where we're saying, like, no, we want to be able to grow our food locally. We want nutrient-rich food locally. We want healthy food locally. We want healthy soil locally. And using that model in our compost as a way of we can make this happen, and that will then turn to kind of redirect where this mass production is happening and how the mass production is happening, and helping to more positively impact our earth.
And can you just, I'm just real curious about how it works. Like, how do you, for your composting and vermicomposting programs, how do you collect waste? Like, how do you get the food scraps? Is there like a program that you're involved with the city, or how does that work?
So now going into like the biodigester, that relationship is going to be different. So we'll be able to like manage, you know, different accounts through like wholesalers who are, you know, feeding these landfills with what could be nutrient-rich soils. In our past, though, the way that we've been doing it is more of a training and just kind of understanding composting in general. So most of our scraps will be from, you know, local restaurants that we also sell food to, or it'll be just, you know, the weeds that produce naturally in our spaces, or from what's left of the plant once we bear the fruit from them. So we've been using pretty much just our own waste, reintegrating our own waste into our own systems.
Fantastic. So Todd, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what Green America does and how you interact with agriculture at Green America.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's two ways, really. One of which is we actually work directly with food supply chains. So going from the largest corporations like Danone and Unilever down all the way to the farmer level, we're working to try and make regenerative agriculture a successful model that's both financially successful and also actually does store the carbon in the ground and regenerates the soil. So one of the things we've been doing with allies is creating something called the Soil Carbon Initiative. And what it is an outcomes-based measure of how successful regenerative practices are on any particular farm. So a farmer can engage in the practices, and then through this process, you can come in and actually measure the carbon that's been sequestered, the actual microorganisms in the soil, and verify that, yes, you're actually doing this the right way. And on any particular farm, there can be all different kinds of microclimates. There can be all different kinds of soil conditions. So you have to actually go through the whole farm and actually look to see, are you successfully practicing regenerative agriculture through your farm? Is it actually working? Are you sequestering that carbon, regenerating that soil? So we've been very excited to work on that project. And then we also work directly with individuals to get them involved in regenerative agriculture as well. We have a program called Climate Victory Gardens, and it's basically the same exact practices that farmers would use on their farm. We're encouraging communities and individuals to put those practices into place in their yards, in their local communities to sequester carbon. As you may all know, in the United States, we have about 40 million acres of lawn, which is about the size of Georgia. It's one of the largest uses of water in the country. We also dump tens of millions of chemicals on our lawns every year and spend $40 billion on our lawns every year. But that's not the best use of land. The best use of our local land, our yards, our communities, is actually to plant things on it, to grow those gardens, like we've been talking about. And so far, we've gotten over 8,500 Climate Victory Gardens registered. They're sequestering over 4,000 tons of carbon. It's like the equivalent of driving like 41 million miles in cars. So we're trying to grow that movement as well so that we get individuals and communities across the country involved, so that everybody's taking part in regenerative agriculture, from the individual to the farm level to the corporate level.
Yeah, so people in their homes, if you have a yard, you can join the sort of regenerative agriculture movement in your yard. If you have access to a community garden or a public space, you can do the same. So Don, what about your organization, and what is it doing when it's not making documentaries? What are you guys getting up to?
Okay. We have a lot of different programs at Kiss the Ground. I encourage everyone to go to kisstheground.com and check it out. If you're inspired at all, you can figure out, well, what can I do personally? But we also have a farmland program. So we do work directly with farmers. We have a whole course. It's very intense. It's 3 years long, so that we're with them every step of the way, and they work specifically with people like Gabe Brown through Soil Health Academy. And so Ray Archuleta and Gabe Brown are part of that, and they get one-on-one training, and some of that is funded by just philanthropy as well. So we do a lot, as a nonprofit, we're always raising money to get the word out, but part of our program does go directly to farmers that are interested in trying to farm regeneratively and transitioning from whatever method they were using to a more regenerative method. So that's the main way we're involved with ag. The rest is really educational, whether it's for school curriculums or this film, for example, which is being also spliced up into a version that's just for farmers and another version that is for the school systems. So it's pretty impressive how many people we've been able to get trained. And then we have one last piece, which is our soil advocate training. And that's where we actually teach people in great depth about how to speak about this to others. And we call them soil advocates. And we have literally trained thousands of people around the world to talk about regenerative agriculture. And it's pretty incredible what's been going on with that.
Okay, wonderful. So going into the chat, we've got some provocative questions that I think are really kind of will strike to the core of the film, and one of them is that in our current economic system, in our current system of massive inequality, really high rates of poverty, actually, for a sort of global North nation, huge levels of wealth. Land is really expensive. If a young person wants to start farming, land is really expensive, hard to get into. How do we broaden access to regenerative agriculture when it seems in our current system to be restricted to wealthy people who have access to a huge amount of land or who can afford to pay, $5, $6, $7, $8 for a dozen eggs? How do we address those inequities? And are those inequities going to block us from being able to get to regenerative agriculture? And there's a related question that I kind of want to mash up here, and that is, how do we reach politicians who are driving degeneration? That comes from Garcia, and I think that and Joy asked a similar question, and I think it's a crucial question that maybe the film leaves hanging a little bit, because I think you could come away from that film saying, hey, if more farmers would just imitate Gabe Brown or imitate Tom Brady and Giselle's diet, then everything would go fine. But actually, I think there are these societal-wide barriers like inequality, like the Farm Bill, let's say. And so how do we take the energy generated by this film and transform it into political power? Darion, do you have any ideas about that? As someone in Chicago, how do you, what is the role of policy at the city level and at the national level? And how do you see, developing a movement to bring power to those conversations?
Well, that's a bit tough for me just because I'm not super politically involved. But what I do believe is that we do need to work out like a relationship with the city that, that says, especially like in our city where we, in our Black and brown communities, we have all this open, vacant space is not being used. So there needs to be a conversation around land isn't meant to be owned by governments. It's not meant to be owned by the rich and the wealthy. Land is meant to be used for the stewards of that land. It is meant to be used for regenerative practices. It's meant to be used for the community to better our community. So I think we need to start having conversations with our politicians about that. And how do we work to give the land back to the people in a way that serves ourselves, but also, again, the earth that we live in and the earth that we have to work to protect.
Excellent. Todd, any thoughts about the sort of political aspect of all this and how to bring political power into the conversation?
Sure, yeah. I think we're at a point where we actually can make some progress on the federal level, which is something we couldn't say until this moment in time. In the recent stimulus that just went through, there was actually $4 billion in there for debt relief for Black farmers in the United States. And that's a significant step forward. Of course, $4 billion of debt relief is not equal to the over $250 billion worth of land that's been stolen from Black farmers over the last century, taken from them, but it's a start in the right direction. We have excellent legislation like Justice for Black Farmers. We have the Emergency Relief Act or Farmers of Color Act. These are important pieces of legislation. They may not pass as legislation themselves, but they could get incorporated into the next budget, into the infrastructure bill, and those bills can pass again through the reconciliation process, which can get around the Republicans' vetoes. And it's possible we could actually put things into place that have a really deep impact in this country. And there's also opportunity at the USDA. There's a lot of pressure on the USDA to change course, to start supporting farmers of color across the United States to address inequities in the system. And I think there's a serious effort that could happen if that pressure is maintained on USDA to reform the whole system.
Don, any thoughts?
Yeah, I did forget to mention a whole part of Kiss the Ground, which is our policy wing as well. So we have actively been working at both the state and federal level on getting people better informed about the potential of regeneration. And I do want to comment that this film, it was made, and there's a lot missing from, say, the BIPOC community, and really. We do believe greatly that we're not the inventors of regeneration or anything like that. It's been happening on this planet for a long time, and there are a lot of cultures. There still are a lot of cultures that practice it. So I think that the world is ready to hear this now, and that we are actually making progress. And the new Farm Bill is coming, and there's a lot of people making regenerative agriculture a point. I mean, you're hearing it. Large corporations are using the word, not just greenwashing, but actually doing things with it. So, General Mills is out there actually proactively doing something. Dan One was already mentioned. So there are some big corporations getting behind this, and there's also politicians using the term regenerative agriculture, which just 5 years ago it wasn't even mentioned. So I think there is some really great opportunity, and we have so much work to do at both large and small scale. And I'd like to mention that not all farms are mega farms. There's plenty of opportunities, farming opportunities for people to, unfortunately, it's mostly leased land situations. But if you follow, if you do a lot of research, you can find out ways that you can get leases in that are really beneficial for you as a farmer if you can explain that what you're going to be doing to the soil and it's going to benefit the property, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of different things out there that I'd have to go on to that are too lengthy to go on to. Sorry.
Okay, that's cool. So Christina asked a question. I wonder if anyone wants to take on. I can jump in. Can you explain why GMOs have led to more pesticide use? Anyone want to tackle that one?
I'd love to. Go ahead, Todd.
Oh, go ahead. I can say a few words, and then Don, I know you know tons about this too, and probably everybody on this panel knows a lot about this topic. But GMOs were specifically designed to be resistant to pesticides. So you're growing a crop like corn or soy, and you can spray glyphosate on it, and it won't kill that crop. It was supposed to kill the weeds around that crop. What this has led to is a gigantic increase in the use of pesticides in the United States, including glyphosate. It's poisoning us, and it's poisoning land and species. And so that is the huge problem with GMOs. The other huge problem is that the weeds become resistant to the pesticides over time. So then you have to add more pesticides. So now companies are trying to create GMOs that are resistant to 5 pesticides, 5 poisons that you put on the land, not just 1 poison. And it's just going to keep spiraling up and up like that if we don't stop. And I'll turn it over to everyone else.
Yeah, you pretty much summed it up. I'd just like to add that those super weeds that are coming out, and one of the things they added to Roundup glyphosate was dicamba, which is another super toxic thing. And they found out, this is after using it, they found out that in hot weather, that particular chemical it volatilizes, it turns into a gas, and it goes up, and then it drifts over other landscapes, killing landscaping. So there's literally cities that have sued these people that have applied this pesticide, or suing the pesticide companies. So we really have to get away from this whole let's kill it and start growing healthy food because it's naturally resistant to a whole lot of pests. So the healthier we can get our soil, as Darius will point out, using vermicompost and compost, but there's lots of ways to get your soil healthy. Just stop killing it and stop killing the life in your soil, and you'll see this immediate response when the microbes start coming back to life and bringing more nutrients to your plants. Your healthy plants won't need the level of pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, etc. because you're literally creating a different soil environment. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and on top of that, if you use sort of biodiversity as a principle on your farm, that is, don't just grow corn and soybeans every year. You disrupt weed patterns. If you add a couple of crops to that mix, you disrupt weed patterns, and you don't need that volatilizing dicamba to spray on top of your live crops. Darion, anything to add to the whole GMO conversation?
Well, kind of related, but not super related. Just because I don't have any like personal experience with GMOs. I've always been taught just straight organic farming. So I've noticed that we just have different ways of not having to deal with that issue of like using pesticides on our farms, and like it's typically just in the healthier soil. The things you're growing will naturally produce its own defense mechanisms for different types of pests, and what it seems to happen is that by introducing these like artificial protectors for your plants, it weakens the crops, especially when it's done over time. So allowing your crops to kind of strengthen themselves in that way and producing themselves, they can be pretty resilient.
And I think we'll probably have a lot of people who have been hearing you talk, Darion, and want to know how they can support urban agriculture. And I wonder if there are any organizations or ways that you could call out that people listening to this, watching this, could support the kinds of work that you're doing in Chicago and urban agriculture in general.
I mean, just kind of checking us out, like at our website. It's at urbangrowerscollective.org. And then we list like a bunch of people that we are working with. Again, we don't work just as UGC. It's Urban Growers Collective. So we work as a collective. We have many of partners throughout the city, especially in Black and Brown communities, North Lawndale, Austin, GGE, Growing Greater Inglewood, and the Inglewood Village Farmers. So we work within the network, and we work to, support each other and support our communities. So just support in the best way you can, whether it's volunteering for us or donations or just transfer of information and help with the transfer of power and the transfer of land. Like, these are all things that we like working really hard to kind of give back to ourselves and our communities and the communities that we're serving.
Fantastic. Okay, so this is a lightning round, very quick, very important question because we have to move on soon. But how important, Jocelyn wants to know, is breaking up these enormous conglomerates that control so much of the input markets, like the GMO seeds and pesticide markets? How important is that, and how do we do it? In 1 minute, who wants to jump? Todd, what are your thoughts on that? Is that an important thing, or is that a priority?
I think it's essential that we break the stranglehold that companies like, say, Bayer, Monsanto, or Syngenta have on the sector. Their model is entirely that they're going to sell you the seeds, they're going to sell you the poison that goes with the seeds, they're going to sell you all the inputs as a farmer, and they're just going to completely profit off of this industrial agricultural system. And see, the only way to actually move where we need to go is to break their stranglehold on the sector. Now, each of those companies is actually marketing itself as a climate leader, that there's a way to use all their products in a way that's good for the climate. So we need to look through their greenwashing. We need to say, no, obviously, this is not the right direction. And we just need to work with more and more farmers and make it possible for those farmers, financially possible for them to break with companies like Monsanto and Syngenta and do the kind of work that we saw in this film.
All right, I think that is actually a good transition into this idea of what do we do now? We have laid out this problem. The movie lays it out quite nicely. There's this great quote from Robert Swan, the activist, who says, the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else is going to save it. That guy over there is going to save it. It's got nothing to do with me. So I think it's a good question to wrap up on is what actions can people take and be part of the solutions? This could be actions that anyone can take as an individual, actions that communities, organizations, and governments and these giant companies could take. And the next slide is going to summarize some of the top actions that our panelists have named, as well as tonight's hosting sponsors and team. Just getting a little confused here, but oh yes, here we go. Here is our slide, and I think there are a bunch of great ideas here. I think one of them that I think we could probably all agree on heartily is that a great way to sort of involve yourself in the topic of this film is to get into composting. Figure out a way that works for you to compost at home, whether it's vermicomposting, which can actually be done indoors and doesn't have to be smelly. But you could also be involved in a backyard situation or a community garden situation, or donating scraps. But just being involved in that sort of cycle of nutrients, I think, is very educational. Living lightly, a little bit lower on the food chain, supporting growers in your area, maybe even in your neighborhood, in the case of urban farming, who are doing things the right way, is a great way to be part of the solution. And I think, just this idea of being a soil advocate. And, I think our society, because so few people farm in our society, it's way less than 2% of people farm in our culture, that there is a lot of ignorance around agriculture. A lot of people just are so removed from it, and just reminding people, be a sort of advocate for soil. Soil is as important as the air we breathe and the water that we drink. And I have to say that personally, for me at this point, the very last square or rectangle down there in this slide, and that is getting beyond, sort of figuring out how to get beyond your own personal consumption choices and personal actions, and being part of a political movement, which is what I think we need to change these problems, and that means getting involved with local leaders and politicians, but also being part of, let's say, the broader climate movement. I see for folks in Illinois, the Illinois Environmental Council is a great way to get involved. But I think just in general, there, being that sort of advocate is, and thinking of yourself as more than a consumer. You are more than some of your consumption choices. You also live in a democracy and can theoretically get out there and make a difference. And tell us in the chat as we close out. And I hope you felt the sense of One Earth's 10-year theme of inspiring change throughout the film and discussion, and how we came together to build community around critical issues. If you would please leave a note in the chat about ways that you are ready to take action and inspire change, and what do you feel compelled to do as a result of today's event? Yeah, so if you could add it to the Vimeo chat. And, oh yes, let me turn it back to the panel. This is just the action question. What top actions do you recommend that folks do? What is if you could just have one wish that people could all go do, what would it be? And let's start with you, Darion.
I think so. So my greatest wish would be, whether you're knowledgeable or not on regenerative agriculture, just finding out ways to support it and becoming informed and informing others, and just making sure that, we are working actively and intentionally to like spread that message so that we can like, bring back some of our native plants and bring back what our thriving prairie lands in our areas, and bring back healthy soil in order for those plants in these lands to be able to live in. So yeah, just and even in my experience, I've dealt with like a lot of resistance. People can be pretty resistant to hearing this and don't see the value in taking care of the planet and don't see the value in agriculture. So just being resilient and understanding what's at stake and what's important for us.
Fantastic. How about you, Todd?
Oh, definitely be active. Everybody saw this movie and is inspired by it. Let it inspire action in your life, whether that inspires you to actually engage in regenerative practices yourself at your home or community, support great local groups like Darion's group, which is a great thing to do, or also use your political voice. This is a time when we can actually move things forward on the state and federal level, and it's only going to happen if lots and lots of people like the folks who are watching this movie with us today, listening to this discussion, if we all take action and put pressure on our politicians to do the right thing.
Fantastic. Now to you, Don.
Sure. I think one of the most basic things that everyone should do is go grab a seed and sprout it and just watch that miracle of life and that process that's going on. It happens just miraculously. So paying attention to nature just on some level, just be in awe of wonder of this beautiful planet that we're on. And then the next thing would be shop at a farmer's market if that's an option for you. If growing your own food's an option, if composting, do anything to get started on this path, but pay more attention to where your food comes from and what it is that you're actually sustaining your body with. Like, am I putting in something that's really nourishing and is the future of what I want to see on this planet? Or am I eating something that's really not that good for me and it's really not going to do the planet that great a thing in the future if that's what I'm supporting? So think about where your food dollars go.
Wonderful. I want to thank each of you for watching the film with us and, you, the panelists, sharing your wisdom. I've learned a lot from our conversation and I really appreciate it. And to learn more about our panelists, on the current slide that's up there right now, we've got the web pages of everyone on the panel. Click on those links, check it out. All of those groups up there are doing very interesting things. And remember to please tweet, post, and generally share on your social media platforms what you just experienced online, and what you just experienced in this film, in the process of the panel. And also, if you found value in today's event and the conversation we just had, I really encourage you to donate to the One Earth Film Fest. And join us again this week, Earth Week, in April throughout the year. It's a great festival. And last but not least, I want to give a huge thanks to each and every one of you out there in Cyberland who has tuned into this. Thank you for participating. Thank you for the incredibly thoughtful comments. I wish I could have gotten to more of them. Really, really great conversation in that chat. And let's all give ourselves and our program participants one last round of applause. Thank you so much. And as you start to file out and click, hang up or whatever it is you click on this thing, this film festival is not over. There are lots of cool films to come. Check out the program, and we hope to see you at another screening. Thank you so much.